Hello, Rebels of the Sharp Illusion. Normally, I start off this podcast by saying hi, but I'm going to start this one off by saying hydration. We know how important hydration is for our bodies. It's the thing that keeps us running, right? You want to be a well-oiled machine. You want to be running efficiently. You know what can help you run efficiently? Liquid IV. It is the category-winning hydration brand fueling your well-being, and the hydration multiplier is the one product that you are missing in your daily routine. It comes in a little stick that's a powder, and in just one stick, you get 5 essential vitamins and 2 times faster hydration than water alone. If you use it first thing in the morning, maybe before a workout, when you feel run down, maybe after a long night out and doing a little partying, you know what I mean? And even, what if you have like a long flight or something like that and you just bleh, right? We all feel that way. Bleh. So add this to your water, and that convenient packaging can go with you anywhere you go, even if you're going to the gym or you're traveling or you're at work and maybe you didn't have a great breakfast. At least it's something that will fuel you up in the morning, and there's a whole bunch of flavors that are available, like sea berry, strawberry lemonade, Concord grape, lemon lime, pina colada, tropical punch, watermelon, strawberry, passion fruit, guava, acai berry. Did I say that right? I never know how to say that. But those are just some of the flavors. Here's some statistics for you folks. 1 stick of liquid IV in 16 ounces of water contains 5 essential vitamins: B3, B5, B6, B12, and even vitamin C. And we all know how important those B vitamins are. It's got 3 times the electrolytes of traditional sports drinks. It's made with premium ingredients. It's non-GMO, and it is free from gluten, dairy, and soy. I'm going to offer you a great deal, Rebels. If you go to liquidiv.com and use offer code Sherpa, you can get 20% off of anything that you order on that site when you're shopping for some better hydration. So that's Liquid IV. Check it out at liquidiv.com. Podcast that you're listening to is being presented to you in cooperation with the SJ Network. If you're a person who'd like to appear on a podcast, contact Stephen Joyner at s-j-network.com. Let's get on with the show.
Today, on Too Many Podcasts, it's an interview with Sharon and Tracey, the hosts of Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. It's a podcast where they talk about their lives when they belong to a religious cult.
I used to be a member of the Secret Vegetable Association cult. But I was banished last week because I spilled the beans.
Welcome to Too Many Podcasts, the podcast about podcasts. Now, podcasting from the Sherpa Chalet on Mount Podcastia, here's your host, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa.
Well, hello there, Rebels of the Sharp Illusion, and welcome to Too Many Podcasts. It is the podcast about podcasts and so much more. It is I, Jim, the Podcast Sherpa. Who else would it be? I don't know. Somebody else will take this job. So we're here together. So I'm glad you are tuning in or pushing the button or whatever it is that we call it to this very interesting episode of Too Many Podcasts. First things first, a little bit of a shout out to a previous guest of mine. His name is Adam Shively, and Adam was on in season 10, and he hosts the Podcasting Business School, and it's a show that I listen to. I haven't made a lot of money yet, but don't worry, keep trying, Adam. One of us will make money sooner or later, and it'll probably be you. I was listening to a show, and he had these 2 ladies on who were fascinating, and they are my guests today.
Who's our guest today, Sherpa?
Their names are Sharon and Tracey, and they host a podcast called Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. Now, you're probably thinking, what? Okay, so I'll explain first. These 2 ladies, when they were younger, when they were teenagers, ended up joining a Christian religious cult, and were in there for a number of years, and they are no longer in it. The cult only, I think, exists online right now, but that's what their podcast is going to be about. It started up this year, relatively new. They've got a bunch of episodes under their belts already, and they talk about getting out of a cult and what was going on within that cult, which was actually founded by Christian music singer Keith Green and later his wife Melanie. And a pair of warnings here, actually, before we get started. One, the language gets a little bit salty, so if you've got the kids around, maybe you want to listen around headphones or just listen to the podcast when you're not driving them in your car or anything like that. You could even fast forward maybe about 40 minutes and listen to the Sherpa samples that we've got coming up and catch the interview a little bit later at night, perhaps. So that's number one. Number two, I noticed that last week we had Jesse Blaze Snyder on, and with this episode, we actually get into discussions about religion. And, I do want to make it clear that, this is not a religious podcast, and it is also not an anti-religious podcast either. These are the opinions of the guests that come on, and these interviews aren't necessarily representative of my views of religion. I don't really want to discuss that, nor does it reflect the views of Spotify for Podcasters, which is the platform that presents this. Just want to be clear, so if you want to go around calling me the Antichrist because I'm having these sorts of episodes, well, you really can't, because if I were the Antichrist, I would be dressing much better than him anyway, or her. Well, maybe not her, I don't know. But anyway, back to my point. These are the types of interviews that you don't really expect to have on a podcast like this. And I considered myself incredibly lucky to get to speak to these women. They're really fascinating, super nice, had a really enjoyable talk with them and really learned a lot too. And, if you really want to learn about the finer details of their experience in this religious cult, do check out their podcast. We really kind of skimmed the surface, but the ladies had a lot to say, and in an amazing way, too. I really am glad that I got to meet them. So, all right, I'm building this up a lot, so let's just check out what the hype is all about and listen in on my conversation with Tracey and Sharon of Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. Hello there, rebels of the Sherpolution. We are here in the cult-free room of the Sherpa Chalet. My guests today are the hosts of Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. We're going to say hello to Sharon and Tracey. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Hello.
That's Sharon.
That's Sharon. I'm Tracey, and it's so nice that someone else did our intro for us, because we're used to saying it ourselves.
Ta-da! This all started when you guys were teenagers.
Yes.
Which was just yesterday.
Of course. Did you know each other as teenagers, or was this...
No, we didn't. I had my conversion, radical Christian, crazy Jesus people experience when I was 14. Mm-hmm. And then I moved to the cult commune when I was 17. And that was in 1979. And then Tracey, how old were you when, what were your ages?
I'm much younger.
Oh, fuck you. Oh, I'm sorry. Are we allowed to use expletives? Do I need to be?
I think you just did.
Well, I think you did just do that. So if you listen to Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters, sometimes Sharon's confessions can be a little salty. So yeah, I was also a teenager, but I was in Texas. Sharon was in Arizona, and I didn't join the cult commune until I was 18, but she was already 20 by that time.
Yeah. What year was that for you? 82?
Yeah, 82.
Yeah. So I was 20 and you were 18.
Yes. Yeah. So I just barely missed knowing her in her teenage years.
Okay. So what originally drew you to this? Now, we're talking about the Last Days Ministries.
Yes.
Okay.
With Christian music star Keith Green, anybody who was on the whole Jesus Christian music scene in the 70s or 80s, I mean, he was a phenom. He was the best-selling artist, packed stadiums. I mean, yeah.
Was he there, or was he there like a Messiah to be like? Was he treated like a Messiah at the commune? Would you say that, or just like a regular person?
Good question.
Well, I wouldn't say Messiah, because he definitely was pointing everything to Jesus, but he was revered as a prophet, and with that comes this kind of mystique that a prophet of God, someone who's just speaking from the heart of God and intolerant of sin and holding everybody accountable, is going to be sometimes act like a bit of an asshole. And it's okay. Not really, but sort of. And yeah, he was charismatic, a bigger than life figure for sure.
Yeah. And an excellent piano player. So I think what a lot of people said was, I followed Jesus, but Keith is my example. So he was definitely very revered. And because he had this, which would later be a signature album, No Compromise attitude, he gave a pretty blistering message to the current church environment at the time. And
Tracey,
then
you're too close to your microphone. You're getting all breathy and huffy again. See, I told you, Jim, I have to edit, so I get these things. I hear the sound. Sorry, back off, girl.
You're okay.
I know I was on a roll there. And then published a newsletter, and it was called the Last Days Newsletter.
It was a magazine, really, with articles, a magazine.
Okay. So that's how a lot of people became familiar with him. And that's how I became familiar with him, which ultimately led me to join up in this commune because I wanted to be around all of these amazingly passionate people for Jesus.
Okay. How about you, Sharon? What drew you?
Well, it was interestingly, Tracey and I both came from alcoholic families, right? So you got to understand, we were very unbalanced. You know, our lives were not stable. We had a lot of, just a lot of shit in our lives. And that really primes a person for some sort of message of answers or salvation or purpose or something. So for me, when I was 14, through weird events, Keith actually wound up coming and staying at our house for a few days in Tucson, Arizona. Mm-hmm. And he was, kind of confronting my parents about their issues. And I'm overhearing it. And all of us, and I had a Catholic upbringing, marginal Catholic upbringing. So I understood the Jesus story. But then I'm seeing this dude, man, and he's got like the long curly hair and the beard and jeans, and he's barefoot, and he's charismatic, and he's challenging my parents. And I'm like, whoa, man, maybe this is the real Jesus. And the things he said seemed to make sense about the pain in my life. So I'm like, sign me up, I'm in.
Yeah. And that was the time, where there was a lot of musicals, Jesus Christ Superstar. And he really did look like he came out of central casting. Yeah. I mean, just very charismatic. The music was there. The look was there. And Godspell.
Hair. I mean, this is, we're talking 70s. We are definitely from the semi-hippie generation.
Okay. The Jesus people. So it was really easy to kind of come along and then follow. You imagine Godspell where they're all kind of skipping along and the Jesus figures in front and all these kind of cool hippies are behind it. That definitely was a draw for me. So I was like, I'm going to skip along in line with all of these people and come to this commune, of course, in Texas. An hour and a half from Waco is where we ended up having that commune.
Do you know what? We have this general sense, or somebody has mentioned, that it's possible that David Koresh actually came and visited us at Last Days Ministries at our ranch in Texas before he set up the thing in Waco, or on his way or something. Well, I'm still trying to track down the is that really legit? But we have this vague memory of it. So I don't know. Might be true, might not.
The timing could track out though, right?
The timing does track out. I have researched that timing. And if he was on his way, there were a couple communes. I think there's a whole study in Time magazine about that generation of creating communes. And there was one, Jesus People USA in Chicago, and then of course us. And then there were little ones here and there that probably haven't gotten much notoriety. And then David Koresh, who ended up getting the notoriety for all the wrong things. So,
and like you said, if he was there, he probably picked up on that sort of charisma that a cult leader would need to keep his flock around him.
Well, and he was very interested in music as well. David Koresh wanted to be a band member. And at that time, contemporary Christian music was really taking off. And,
Keith was number one. I mean, he was number one.
And I'm sure he could see what a draw that was, because music is powerful, especially with teenagers.
Gets the girls to drop their panties. Yes, it does.
Wow, Sharon. But we didn't do that.
Not us. Not
that.
No. Not at our commune, but at David Koresh's it did.
Yeah.
It definitely did.
That is true. So what were kind of the restrictions that you lived under when you were there?
You go, Tracey.
Yeah. So we always say, yes, we were part of a cult commune, but not the fun kind, because we were almost like a weird modern sect of nuns and monks. We had a very strong purity culture mentality there, where there was separation of, we called them the brothers and the sisters.
Very creepy now.
Yes. And so, and it loosened up a little bit over time. But when I went there, even in we ate in what we called the ranch house. It was this big old log cabin that was converted into the dormitories and the kitchen. And you would have a line at the table of the brothers and then the line of the other table of the sisters. And if you wanted to have any attraction or relationship, it had to get approved all through your leadership. And you couldn't have any conversation with that brother or sister or alone time unless that got approved. Mm-hmm. And of course, the women particularly were put under a lot of scrutiny to dress modestly and not be a stumbling block for your brother.
Yeah.
And was there like arranged teen marriages? Was that part of it?
Yeah, also? That was me.
That was you.
Yep.
Okay.
I was, Keith himself arranged my marriage, set up my engagement with it's funny because everybody is young. So I'm still a teenager. Keith is in his mid-20s. The other quote elders, they're in their 20s, and there were two other elders. So there was Keith and Wayne and Martin who would become my husband. So Wayne and Martin are the elders. Wayne had already gotten married there, and then Keith set up me to marry Martin. And it was pretty much, they've prayed about it. They think this is what God wants. What do you think, Sharon? And, hey, when the prophet of God is telling you, hey, we've prayed about it, we think this is God's will, what are you going to say?
Very true.
Mm-hmm.
So you're not married to Martin anymore, though?
No. That it lasted almost 25 years, and it took a long time to come out of that whole imprisonment of belief system, first of all. And let me just say, my ex-husband, Tracey's ex-husband, like all of us there, I mean, we came in as broken and damaged people, right? Mm-hmm. So this is not about trying to trash anybody or anything else. It's like, man, we were all messed up and kids, so it took a long time. The current terminology is deconstruction of your faith, like kind of rethinking and looking at it piece by piece. We did that a couple decades ago before there was such a word. And it was very lonely because there really wasn't a community or internet or resources or anything. And it also took a long time, I think, for both of us to recognize how unhealthy our marriages were, which again, is not trying to lay blame on the individuals, but rather this whole system that sets things up for all the wrong reasons.
Tracey, was your husband also in Last Days?
Yes, he was. And of course, we didn't call them arranged marriages. We called them courtships, and basically sanctioned through the leadership. And we were running the training school. So, of course, we had a training school, which was a great way to get new people to come in and work for the ministry.
Yeah, it was called Intensive Christian Training School. And the idea was you're basically indoctrinating young people in this extremism of radical Christianity. And they pay us to come and be preached at for what was it? 8 weeks?
It's a 10-week session. Followed by a second term of 10 weeks where you're in class time every day, you have required reading, and then you work at the ministry during the daytime. And my husband at the time ran it in charge of the males, the brothers, and I was in charge of the sisters. And at that time,
you were single. You were still single.
We were still single. Mm-hmm. And so there was definitely a lot of pressure of, wouldn't it be great if these two could get together? Because being a married couple running a ministry just, gives you all that protection from all the things that can happen.
And for the women too, because we were bought into this idea, women shouldn't be in these primary leadership positions. So an unmarried woman had very limited options as far as service to the kingdom of God. But if you are married, now you have this quote spiritual covering of your husband, and you can now, you can do more things.
Yes, you can be a leader. So we got married there, and we've tried to do a study to really get the data as far as how many couples that were married as, coming together in that setting, how many ended up divorcing. Mm-hmm. We don't have the exact data, from our back of the napkin. It is higher than the national average, but I would say some of the problems that, we were intimately involved with that these couples faced were deeply wounding. I mean, just some real messes of marriages. And I think that's one of the sad fallouts of just coming together in that environment, because you're not getting to really know someone.
Yeah. And some have stayed. I mean, one of my big, huge crises was, 20 years in, I'm finally seeing a secular therapist, and took me a couple of years to realize how truly abusive the relationship was. And I was terrified of getting a divorce because I believed I'd go to hell. So we know that there are people that are still in those marriages that are not healthy at all, but they're kind of locked in because of the belief system.
Yeah. And then some got the luck of the draw and they're happy. There's a few.
Yeah. Some are happy. Yeah.
Yeah. Now I know that Keith Green passed away a number of years ago. He was in a plane crash. Does Last Days still exist?
So Last Days exists online, but that is a good lead into an episode that people can go in and download. So our episode 14, we just dropped it this week, so it'll still be up when this airs. But Sharon and I, for the first time, go on record and talk about all the details of that day and the reasons that led up to that crash. So it's a great episode to get to know kind of
things that honestly have been kind of suppressed for 40 years. And we've actually kind of scratched our heads for the last decade wondering, why has no one talked about this stuff? Why is it still all whitewashed? And he died in a small plane crash right there on our property. He was responsible for putting not only himself, but 2 of his own young children, plus another family with 6 children, and the pilot and the parents, 12 people into a 7-seater plane. And it's pretty intense. And so we kind of open up and reveal some of the things that just have never been talked about or discussed about what really happened that day. And it's quite controversial. And many people in the Christian world and those that are still Keith Green fans are, I actually, this is a first. In a recent comment, I actually was told that I am one of the antichrists. So, yeah.
for talking about this and for casting, there's a very weird thing in there that, they say, of course, he wasn't perfect. Of course he was human. Why are you guys, attributing to him more responsibility? His death has worked out for so much good in the world. And it's that whole message that happens in the news every day that you hear, when it happened in the Catholic Church, when it happened in the Southern Baptist Convention, when it happened to Bill Gothard with, the latest IBLP docuseries, from Prime Video.
Shiny, happy people.
People. These stories are like, but look at the good that they've done. And you people just want to erase all of that by talking about their human frailties. So that's part of, why Sharon is the Antichrist.
Did you each have a breaking point while you were still involved with them?
Well, and we will be, we just launched our podcast in April. And so we're, telling the story as we go. But
we don't want to spoiler alert. It's okay.
No, it's fine. It's fine. We'll go, this is very concise. Mm-hmm. So for me, it was, first of all, after Keith died, his wife, Melody, kind of took over. And when I say took over, took over. And a few years later, those of us in leadership were kind of the people that were kind of more involved in running the things in the ministry became very concerned that she was looking to do things that were like misappropriating funds and just self-indulgence and things. We were like, no, this is no good. We kind of became whistleblowers. And in the end, we got kicked out. After we were kicked out, we still stayed in that mentality of, hey, we're still sold out for Jesus. You know, we're going to serve Jesus on our own outside of the commune, and didn't like what was going on there. But we were still totally entrenched and imprisoned in the belief system. Mm-hmm. And for me, it was probably about 10-ish years later, maybe more, when things within my marriage just started to become more painful and more difficult. And that led me to start questioning, God, if you love me, why is this like it is? And then being in the world, I started a business, I'm interacting with people who are non-Christians, and my belief system says that every one of them is going to hell to burn in the lake of fire for all of eternity. And I began having this cognitive dissonance because I'm like, these are pretty good people. How can that be? And that just started for me a crack in the foundation of, wait a second. And then I started examining, is the Bible really all true and infallible? And that just started a whole series of events and a few years of agonizing questioning to finally come to a point of freedom. So that was me. How about you, Tracey?
Yeah. And so when she said that they were whistleblowers, she's talking about she and her husband at the time. So yeah. My husband and I were still leading the school, and we stayed on for a little bit longer. And I think I had mentioned this in an earlier interview. You can take the girl out of the cult, but you can't take the cult out of the girl as easily. And so, I was newly married, and then we bought into a whole host of other kind of family beliefs of no birth control, trusting God for your family size, a woman stays at home. And so, I went on to have, 5 wonderful children whom I love dearly. But it was in quick succession, one baby, then another baby, another baby. And, we were really struggling financially. Trying to live on.
Left. You're jumping ahead.
So we had left also, but we left slightly after Sharon did. So that was the part of me being out of that commune, but still in that mindset. And it was really as my children were getting older, and I was homeschooling them and trying, to teach them to be separate from the world. And thank God that I have strong-willed, smart, intelligent children, because not one of them was buying what we were training them to.
And they're not buying the bullshit. They're not buying it.
And, we were having home churches, and our, house was filled, and my kids would just start to really challenge me with some very good intellectual arguments. And that was the first crack for me. And then, very similar to Sharon, you start getting that crack, and then you start studying and you start looking at things, and then it was a domino effect. And this was happening to me separately. We were states away. I was living in Pennsylvania. Sharon was living in Richmond, Virginia. And both of us didn't really want to tell the other, because in that mindset, you get preached to. So if I start showing cracks,
we were afraid
they are
to
concerned
say to each other
about me. She's going to pray. You're going to feel a certain amount of rebuke. And when you've had a good friendship, you don't really want to introduce that. And I don't know, she invited me to a trade show, and we were in the hotel room, and it was kind of like, well, I've started questioning this. And then she was like, well, I've kind of questioned this. And then we just built on that until we're like, oh my God, you're thinking the same thing I'm thinking. We probably didn't say God at the time.
No, we didn't. But our lives have been really freaky parallel, because I have 5 children as well, right? So we're born again in our teens, alcoholic family, joined last days, these contrived marriages, 5 kids, questioning on our own, finally getting out of the whole. We were both virgins on our wedding nights. We do not recommend that. We have a whole 4-part series called Virgins and Volcanoes about that purity culture and just the whole debacle that whole thing was. But then we come out in our 40s and we decide to have fun that we never had when we were teenagers. And we're in the business world. And so, yeah, pretty freaky parallels.
All right. So you guys obviously maintain contact after all of this was done. But what made you land on a podcast?
So honestly, what made me land on it was 40 years ago last year, July, there was a celebration of Keith's going, to be with Jesus through the plane crash, and
going home to heaven.
Mm-hmm. And Melody Green led that at a Youth with a Mission based in Tyler, Texas. And one of the other elders' wives was there from the stadium. And it was
live streamed.
It was live
streamed all over the world. Big deal.
And I was horrified that after 40 years, they hadn't moved from some of the most toxic parts of the belief system. Mm-hmm. And, there is a book, there's an autobiography out there called, The Life Story.
Not auto.
Not what? Oh, yeah, an autobiography. Not an autobiography, a biography. Okay. And it just,
called No Compromise, The Life Story of Keith Green. That's the book. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And so, that and, my ex-husband seemed to take 3 steps backwards more into some of the toxic parts of this belief system that really put a wedge with my own children. And I was like, I can't just sit back and let this tale continue to be told of this most amazing commune and this most amazing man and this most amazing belief system. And I'm like, Sharon, we've got to speak about this. And,
right. Well, and that's because it's not just because it's something that happened 4 decades ago. It's because that message is still being used today to recruit young people, teenagers, young people to don't go to college, join Youth with a Mission. Pay money to go to discipleship training school and raise support and manipulate your family and friends to give you money to pay to our bases around the world that gets kicked up to the leaders there, and lives. I mean, we've talked to people coming out of Youth with a Mission, which is this undercover international. Oh my God, we're going to be working on talking about that one too. But that's the thing. This story and the mythology of Keith Green is still being used today to funnel people into these high control, spiritually abusive, just awful situations that wind up devastating lives. I mean, we're talking to a couple who, what are they in their late 30s with kids or 40s?
They're in their 40s, yeah.
40s. In their 40s. They have no retirement, no savings, very few marketable skills. They've given their entire, they've given 25 years of their lives to these mission things, and they're just kicked to the curb. And that is wrong. And that's why we're doing this now, is because it's not just in the past. This same shit is happening today.
Yes. And on the political realm, we're pretty stunned at the rabid political climate that is happening now in the name of fundamentalism. And, we had our hands in that as well when we were back at Last Days Ministries, an organization which was an arm of it called Americans Against Abortion, worked to give a petition to Ronald Reagan and then started working with the moral majority. And we feel culpable in that. We had our hand in that. And that was kind of the dawning of the moral majority and the religious right. And we've just seen it snowball into this rabid, toxic stew. And we are wanting to tell our stories and say, hey, this isn't even what the Jesus People movement started out.
No, this was not this is not barefoot hippies on the beach singing, saying, let's love one another. I mean, that's the Jesus movement we signed up for. And it morphed into something absolutely horrendous. And we feel responsible for playing a part of it. And we're in our 60s now. And it's like, yeah, we got to do something. So the way the podcast started was, Tracey kind of ambushed me. Go ahead,
Sharon's
Tracey.
very busy. And so I thought, and we're both very busy, And I said, I'm just going to start my storyboard on Instagram, just going through my journals, getting all the pictures, going through the timeline so I can start to tell this story. And then I will have it documented. And in that, Troy and Brian from another podcast, which we cannot recommend enough, called I Was a Teenage Fundamentalist, saw some of my posts. And they were big Keith Green fans back in the day who have also now deconstructed. So they immediately said, will you come on our podcast and talk to us about this? And I said, yes. And I still hadn't told Sharon. I told Sharon at one point, I'm like, I'm going to do a podcast. She's like, great, great, great. Yep, I'll come on your podcast when you're ready. But I didn't want to start one by myself because how boring is that just to hear me talk? So I did this interview. They recorded it. They sent it to me. And then I texted Sharon this very weird text like, hey, Sharon, I did this thing. Here it is.
Yeah, because at the end, she's going, yeah, you really need to talk to my friend Sharon. You really need to get Sharon on here. So
I was like, Sharon's stories are so much better than mine because she didn't know Keith since she was 14. They got a Bible together. She was there in California. So, yeah. And then they invited her on, and they've been tremendously great, helpful mentors to us as we've started this podcast journey because it's hard.
Oh, yeah.
You know something about that, Jim, don't you?
Just a little something, yeah. The one other thing I was wondering is, having gone through all of this in your lives, I mean, and it's really, you went through a big upheaval for both of you, and really, as you said, like leading parallel lives, even when you left. What's your outlook on like organized religion now? Are you like left soured by it? I mean, do you have a different feeling from when you were like a teenager?
Tracey, you want to go or you want me to?
Go for it.
Okay. So I still consider myself to be a spiritual person.
Okay.
I definitely do not believe in the Bible box. So the first thing is looking at the Bible, because all of Christianity is based on this text, this collection of hodgepodge writings. And if you believe that every word is the inspired, infallible, literal word of God, well, then that should dictate a lot of how you live. And we tried our best to live a lot of that. Not all, but a lot.
Mm-hmm.
If, however, the Bible is not that, if it contains some kind of great wisdom, like kind of universal, transcendent wisdom that actually you can find, frankly, in a variety of cultural texts from around the world and across history. I believe it does have some of those. And I think it also has opinions of men and some bullshit. And so the question is, that whole question of, is there a God? Well, I definitely no longer believe in the God of the Bible or this idea of Jesus and the whole salvation redemption story. Is there something beyond? Is there something that is transcendent and connecting all of living creatures and even maybe the inanimate in the universe? I don't know. And the beautiful thing is the uncertainty of that. I actually have more peace and more joy in my life being able to just embrace and say, I don't know. I still see inexplicable things that seem to work towards the higher good in myself and in others. So I do have a belief of something, but I don't define it, nor do I think it can be defined. And I think that attempt of man to define and have an organized religion comes out of fear, comes out of desire for purpose and meaning. And so those are all very human and understandable things. And as long as somebody wants to do that and it brings them comfort, that's great. But the problem to me with organized religion is it's not just about giving comfort to the individual or meaning to the individual. It morphs into imposing beliefs onto others that directly impact and damage an individual's sense of self-worth and value in the world. It creates self-loathing. And then the attempt to restrict and deny basic human rights to others because of what you believe. This is what I have the biggest problem with.
Absolutely. And all of that. And just to say that the toxic beliefs that have been born out of ancient texts that people will not move on, particularly homosexuality, striking children. Those are my two big ones that were foundational in me having to rethink that. I completely move away from that. And then you go deeper into the story and you say, if I have to believe that I was born so sinful that blood had to be spilled in order for me to be acceptable for God to look at me, I've had to move away from that as well. So when you start taking those pillars out, it's back to, I also am a spiritual person, believe that humanity, we love, a spiritual practice. So do no harm to me, do no harm to little children, do no harm to your fellow citizen, and you get to practice what you want to practice. But too much harm is being done in the name of organized religion.
Okay.
Amen.
Now being both of you being moms of 5, what advice would you give to either your kids or even anybody to keep them out of the situation that you guys got involved in when you were teenagers?
It's so funny because I feel like my kids had to give me the advice because they were homeschooled and, at different, when you have 5 kids spanning, over the different age groups, I don't even know what was in them that started challenging me, but they have been the ones that have said, and, this doesn't make sense to me. Or one of the most profound things I think one of my sons said is, I looked at all of these men who were coming to these home fellowships, and I could not respect one of them in the way that they were being a father. And that had a obviously deeply profound impact on me. And so I think, it sounds so trite, but as far as following that part of your heart that wants to do good by your fellow man, follow that instead of principles that end up hurting people in the end.
Yeah. And I think for parents, Tracey and I came very late in life to a sense of self-awareness, to real self-awareness and self-acceptance.
Sure.
In our 40s, so most of our kids were adults and out. And so I think that journey of self-awareness and personal growth, where we can look at ourselves, we can be honest with ourselves, we can love and accept ourselves, knowing there is no such thing as perfection. That's a false construct. But if every day we are looking to understand and love ourselves more and understand and love others more, that connection with your child, validating their individuality, that they are their own person, and we are simply their guides to help them know what they're feeling, name their emotions, name their fears, normalize all of that. Don't shame it. Those are the things that if you as a parent are giving your child that safe space and that affirmation, they don't have to go looking for it in the crazy cult leader.
Mm-hmm. I think what's really cool about your stories is that there are some people who don't get out of cults with their lives. And both of you ladies, you got out with your lives and you actually gave yourselves a life to build on as well. Mm-hmm. And now, doing your podcast, you really get to share a lot of that insight that people probably just never even imagined about things that go on in these organizations.
That is the truth.
That is. And we are very, very grateful for that, and grateful for our friendship, because I know we're, talking to more and more people who have, have been much deeper into some bad stuff than even we have. And we've had each other, and that has been a gift. So I am very happy to be on this journey with Sharon.
Me too. I love you so much, Tracey. I do.
Because it really does help. And I think now more than ever, she had mentioned a deconstructing community online. There is a growing community, and it does help to know that you're not alone and that these things that you're struggling through, that there's other people who have thought these and found a way out. And Sharon's been an amazing support to me in that journey. And we are hoping that we can be a support to others in that journey as well.
Sure. And our age too. I mean, that's one thing that's different, Jim. Okay, we're admitting we're in our 60s. We're still fun, but we're in our 60s, a little bit in our 60s. And a lot of these folks that are out there that are going through this process and being vulnerable and open and transparent with it in public. I mean, some of them are younger than our kids. And so that is both really, really cool. And we also hope to give them encouragement that, there is a really cool life beyond all this shit.
Yeah, you get to bring a real wisdom to that. And I was curious, I mean, not to change the subject too much. I mean, I know you guys mentioned I was a teenage fundamentalist. Are there any other podcasts that you guys like to listen to?
Well, yes, Cheers to Leaving. I think we're going to be a guest on that soon. And for me, that's what started me on this journey, because I wanted to hear from my kids' age perspective.
Yeah.
Because some of these things are really hard to go to your parents with and tell them, you screwed me up, right? You get really defensive. And it has been very healing for me to hear other children growing up in very similar circumstances to my kids and to hear their stories. And I've been able then to have that empathy and think, oh my God, that's what I did to, my child. That's what I did in this phase of their life, and open up that conversation. So there's a great amount out there now. Cheers to Leaving Eden. I was a teenage fundamentalist.
One of my favorites I've actually listened to for years and years is Hidden Brain on NPR. Love that. I'm kind of a psychology and behavioral science geek, so I love that show. Also, Bart Ehrman, Misquoting Jesus. That's a great one. Somebody wants to say, okay, well, what is this thing? Why is the Bible all it's made out to be, or are there issues? That's a great podcast. And I just started listening to The Witch Trials of J.K. Rowling. Yes. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, and I'm really into that right now.
Yes. Okay. Holy Ghosting is another one that is run by kids. The kids would be my kids' age. That has been super helpful for me.
They're kids.
Kids. I know. It's so funny that we're so old.
Okay. So now here's the time you guys get to do a little shameless self-promotion where you can let everybody know where they can follow you, and if you got any social media hangouts, or let them know about your show. It's all yours.
Shameless self-promotion.
Go for it, Tracey.
I will go for it. And I will say that that's probably been the biggest challenge at our age, is trying to be on every freaking social media platform that there is out there.
Oh my God.
So our main one, and the one that I am most comfortable in, is Instagram. feetofclay.cultsisters, and there is a link tree there that sends you to all the other ones that we have, and of course our website. We are known.
The website is.
Yes. So I was just about to explain our name.
Here's the problem with the Jim. Here's the problem with the co-host.
Yes, this is the problem. So we are Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters, but that's a lot to say. And in all social platforms,
that's the podcast.
Correct. So in all social platforms, it doesn't always fit. So we are Confessions of the Cult Sisters website, feetofclay.cultsisters on Instagram. So go to the link tree, and that will help you not have to remember all those names and be able to send you everywhere that we are.
Okay, we can share that on the show notes, so don't worry
That would be great.
It'll make it a lot easier, trust me.
And we have a lot of fun. I mean, we talk about some really hard, painful, difficult shit. And we laugh a lot. We laugh a lot.
I have a hard time trying to grasp that concept.
And we do, even though we're old, because purity culture has been such a part of our background, we do go down I wouldn't even say the rabbit hole, but a very open and honest conversations about sexual development and what it does to you when you grow up under so many of those constraints and our particular journey out. And then we are meeting some other folks who've been willing and brave enough to come on and talk about their journey out. So yeah, and we try to give warnings everywhere where we get a bit explicit.
So follow us. Please follow us. Please like us.
You
How pathetic is that?
Like me.
Right? See, we're old enough to know that. All those other podcasters, they will not get that. You like me.
Yeah,
you
really like me.
See, I'm in your age range, so I get the references.
Yeah, that's great. We might need to have we have to explain things in our show notes sometimes. But even though Sharon is the Antichrist, please don't be afraid to follow us.
Okay, they are Tracey and Sharon. They are the hosts of Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. Ladies, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Jim, thank you.
Thank you. And I hope us talking over each other all the time isn't too hard for you. We're still learning.
Now it's time for Sherpa samples. If you've got a podcast you'd like us to sample, contact us, and we'll mention your name on the show.
That's right, Rebels. It's time once again for Sherpa Samples, which is where I take a deep dive into the podcast charts and see what's going on there and let you know what it's all about. The purpose of this segment isn't to review the podcast, but just to really let you know what they're all about. You know, some of them have some unusual titles and you're like, should I listen? Should I not listen? Well, you got me to sample it and I can tell you what it's all about because that's my job as a podcast Sherpa. Now you would know everything. Well, almost. I don't know. So I've checked out 10 podcasts this week that you might be interested in listening to along with Sharon and Tracey's podcast. So let's get started, shall we? I believe we shall. And this was a complete coincidence, I promise you, because I was just going down the charts, and this is the one I stumbled across first. It's called God Awful Movies. And you know the guys who were from Citation Needed and The Greatest Generation, which are podcasts that we sampled previously? Well, some of those guys gathered together for this podcast, and they talk about bad religious movies. Okay. And the one that they talked about, I think, was like a 3-hour-long Nigerian religious movie, which apparently sounds really weird, but they were having a great time talking about it. That's all I can say about that one. And while we're talking about movies, here's another movie podcast called Kermode and Mayo's Take. And I guess they're two movie critics, and they got to talk about some movies that are out there right now. And I know they also featured an interview with the director of the latest Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny, which I believe is the last in that series. The Economics of Everyday Things is a podcast that is brought to you by Freakonomics Radio. And you know, I'm a little biased towards Freakonomics Radio. I love those guys. This was a little bite-sized episode. I think it was about 15 minutes long. It was about Michelin stars. Yeah, you know, the restaurant review people and how it affects a lot of businesses that are in the Michelin review book. Would this podcast ever get Michelin stars? I think we have to serve food for that, and they may not be partial towards cooked yak. So we'll move on with that. But again, an enjoyable podcast. Pod Save the World is brought to you by an individual who was former President Barack Obama's national security advisor. And then there's another gentleman with it as well. I forgot his name. I didn't write it down. Sorry. And they talk obviously about political events going on in the world and in the United States. I think it was roughly about an hour long. Very informative, very interesting guys. Not an NBA podcast is hosted by Kenny Beecham, and Kenny Beecham is a YouTuber. I don't know what affiliation he has with the NBA, and he keeps saying this isn't a podcast, it's just him speaking his mind on issues in the NBA, and you can tell he's a big sports fan, especially in basketball. And it's interesting because last week I kind of bashed a podcast called the Terrible Takedowns Wrestling Podcast. I don't even remember the name of it. And I kind of felt when I was listening to it, like, I don't know who this person is. And, they're not really giving these great opinions on professional wrestling. He didn't like this. He didn't like that. He was just cursing a lot, and then it just really wasn't enjoyable to listen to, and I thought I was actually going to feel the same way about listening to this podcast, but no, I actually really enjoyed it. Kenny Beecham is an interesting YouTube personality. I liked his takes on the issues in the NBA, even though I don't really follow basketball. He was very entertaining and engaging. So maybe if you're into the NBA and you just want to hear a guy's opinion, check this podcast out. On the true crime side, of course, we have true crime podcasts that always end up in our Sherpa Samples list. We've got 3 of them this week. One of them is The Girlfriends. And it's not a true crime podcast per se, but it is kind of interesting because it has to do with several women who once dated the same doctor, and as they're complaining about him and talking to each other, it turns out that this doctor's wife, we'll say, disappeared under mysterious circumstances, and they look into this through their common experiences. Anatomy of Murder is produced by Ashley Flowers, who's actually done a whole bunch of true crime podcasts as well. If you listen to The Deck, that's one of her creations, and there's another one that she does that's very popular also, and I'm drawing a blank, but you guys know which one it is. You can correct me on social media. It's okay, Sherpolution, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But Ashley Flowers doesn't host this. This is hosted by, I believe, an investigator and a prosecutor, and this episode was about the murder of 2 Marines in Hawaii. And finally, LISK, which is an acronym for Long Island Serial Killer. The timing on this is really kind of unusual as well, because at the time of this recording, just recently, they've arrested someone who is the alleged Gilgo Beach killer, and this is who they are referring to. A guy named Rex Uerman of Massapequa Park, Long Island. They are building a case against him. We'll see where this goes, and I'm sure as this podcast progresses, they will probably get into the investigation and probably the eventual trial of Mr. Uerman if he's in fact the actual killer. A few other podcasts that we also checked out are Nobody Should Believe Me, which is a podcast about incidents of Munchausen by proxy. And if you don't know what that is, this is a situation where maybe a parent of a child convinces the child that they're ill and tells other people that they're ill and makes them appear ill. And they go into different stories with different people doing this. And I believe the child involved in the episode that I was listening to has actually testified to the Texas state government for advocating protection of children from situations like this. The story itself is kind of horrific because you don't want horrible things to happen to little children. It is something that really does exist in society. I think they've actually done TV movies about it and probably other podcasts as well. But this was really a fascinating and kind of scary podcast to check out as well. And lastly, the return of Jay Shetty. This one is called Calm for Beginners. Calm! Everybody be calm, please! We listened to Jay Shetty when we sampled On Purpose with Jay Shetty. And as I mentioned back then, as a life coach, I'm really fascinated by him. I really like his style and his approach with people. And I'm sure if you can spend 5 minutes just listening to the Calm for Beginners podcast, maybe you'll be a little calmer, just like the Sherpa. And wow, I got through it because I'm nice and calm. So let's head on into the outro.
Let's get back to the Sherpa.
Sorry about that.
No!
Very special thanks to Tracey and Sharon of Feet of Clay, Confessions of the Cult Sisters. If you want to learn more about what it was like being in a religious cult, check their podcast out. And again, a special thanks to Adam Shively of the Podcasting Business School for making the connection so I got to talk to these ladies. I'm very honored to do so. Hey, if you're enjoying the show, you know what to do. We talk about this every week. Leave me a nice review, please, on Apple Podcasts. And by doing so, you could be entered in our contest to win podcast merchandise. From me, not from one of the fancier podcasts. But it's nice stuff, though. It's from the Tea Sherpa Shop, which, of course, is sponsored by tpublic.com. So you know that they make good stuff. Also, if you are enjoying this show, please subscribe on your favorite podcast app, except one. And I'll tell you why. Stitcher is actually closing its doors, from what I understand. And I know I had a number of listeners that were catching the show on Stitcher. So if you're unsure where to listen, just keep in mind that we're pretty much available anywhere. And even if you go to my website, sherpalution.com, you will see about 20 different sources where you can continue to listen to the podcast. And please do continue and subscribe and keep in touch with the Sherpalution. And Sherpalution, again, is the word that you want to know if you want to contact me on social media. Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I'm starting on this Threads thing, but I don't know. Let's see how it works. I'm not very good on Twitter either. You know, I'm old. I don't get these things. But and you can also listen to us, because there's really nothing to watch, on the Sherpalution YouTube channel. Our tag there is at Sherpalution 5000. And of course, there's Sherpalution.com, where a whole bunch of things are going on there if you want to check it out as well. So I think that will do it for me this week. We've got another interesting interview coming up. I don't think it has anything to do with religion, so you can scribble out that Antichrist review right now. So thanks for listening. And Lord Mr. Bruce, I believe it is time for us to get ready for our next episode. And until then, Rebel of the Sherpalution, I wish you a hearty Viva la Sherpalution, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to Too Many Podcasts. Please disperse. You can go home now. I said you can go home now. Viva la Sherpalution. Viva la Sherpalution. Oh. Yeah, I'll come back now, you hear?
You know, Rebels, if you've been checking out some of my promotional ads on social media, you will be aware that I have been using a lot of AI programs to help me create ads. But you know what? There's a lot more uses for AI than just funny little videos. And I'd like to introduce one of our new sponsors, Podium. It is a leader in creating AI tools for podcasters. Now, let's say you've got a podcast, or maybe you're even thinking of doing a podcast. You're probably wondering, well, how can AI be integrated with your workflow? I'll tell you about Podium. As a podcaster, you know that writing show notes and creating chapters and transcribing episodes takes a lot of time, and it can cost you a lot of money too. But you know what? That's where Podium comes in. It's an AI tool designed specifically for creators and podcasters, with the goal of making post-production tasks quick and easy. And in just a few minutes, Podium generates show notes, chapters, summaries, clips for social media, a full transcript, suggested episode titles, social media posts, and more. Whew, that's a lot of work for one little program. Your show notes are key to your podcast's success because it helps new listeners find your podcast, and they'll know if it's a fit for them. You know, kind of like Too Many Podcasts. It also improves your SEO, that's your search engine optimization. Ooh, big phrase there. And overall accessibility. And with Podium, you can focus on creating a great podcast and let Podium's AI do the heavy lifting. But Podium isn't just for solo creators and podcasters. It's a game changer for editors, producers, marketers, agencies, and production studios. Teams that use Podiums are able to increase workloads, decrease turnaround times, and improve their quality. How does it work? Very easy. First, go to Podium's website, and you'll see that link that's right there in the show notes. You get 3 hours free just to try it. Pretty cool, huh? And using that link also supports this show as well. And you know what else happens? Because I'm a good guy. You use my link, you will get 50% off for your first month. So visit the site, upload an MP3 file, and download your files, and that's it. And if you need anything else, you can use Podium GPT to generate articles and any marketing copy you might need in seconds. Instant show notes, transcripts, chapters for your podcast or channel. This will level up that podcast. So check out Podium today.